last meeting. So this is still on descriptive statistics, but this time um, we are going to discuss measure of dispersion. Okay, so if you can recall what we had discussed last meeting, we have discussed the measure of central tendency, wherein we are concerned in identifying identifying the very center of our distribution, or where is the center of our distribution of our data. So that is we have solved for the mean, median, and mode. So those are the three common central tendency. Okay, so where is the center part of our data? So today we're going to discuss how widely spread our data is with respect to the mean. Okay? So, gaano kalayo yung data natin with respect to the center of this distribution, or uh, what is parang how spread the data is. What's the distance of our data from each other. But then, pag sinabi nating variability, really this is with respect to the center. Okay? Parang the spread of our data with respect to the mean, to the center of the distribution. Kasi 'di ba, if we have distribution, data distribution, meron tayong of course gitna or yung central tendency. Tapos yung dispersion natin, that is with respect to that middle value or to that dispersion. Okay. So again, today's discussion is measures of dispersion or measure of spread. So there are also three common measure of dispersion or measure of spread that we're going to solve for. Okay. So so as an introduction, measures of central tendency simply approximates the central value of the distribution. Different data sets having the same mean may have completely different spreads of data. So it's possible for two data to have the same mean, but then magkaiba yung range, no, ng highest and lowest value. They might have the same mean, but then possibly then that having the same mean, they can also have different spread. Okay, that is why it's also parang kino-consider din natin, aside from getting the center or the central part of our distribution, kino-consider natin to get the spread. Okay, so variations may be different from one group of data to another. Hence, there is a need to consider how the values are being spread or dispersed. So in this part, we will tackle the most commonly used measures of variability, such as the range, variance, and standard deviation. So we'll try to solve for these three measure of dispersion for both grouped and ungrouped data. Okay, so let's start with the range. So the range is the simplest measures of dispersion, and this is obtained by taking the difference between highest and the lowest value. So simplest because this is simply subtracting the highest value to the lowest value. So ganun lang yung range. So if we are given a set of data to get the range, all we have to do is identify what's our highest value in our data set, and we subtract that by the lowest value in our data set. And then we also have the variance. So the variance is the average of square deviations from the mean. Sample variance is denoted by S squared, while population variance is denoted by sigma squared. So these are the notation for variance, and then this is our formula. If you're given only a sample, then the left side should be our formula. But if we're given a population, then the right one, no, the right equation should be our formula to use for identifying the variance. So in identifying the variance, we have the formula S squared is equal to the summation of x minus x bar squared, or all over n minus 1. Now, this is a familiar notation right here. Ito siya. Is just actually, diba, x bar. So if you can actually recall, ginamit natin siya last meeting, which is mean. Okay? So kailangan natin muna yung mean before we can solve for the variance. Okay? So in identifying the variance, it's a must to solve first for the mean. Ito din siya. This one, yung X bar, that's the sample mean. Tapos yung yan, that's the population mean, di ba? Okay. So in identifying both the sample variance and the population variance, kailangan muna natin talaga i-solve si mean before we can solve for the actual variance. And then, yeah, that's one difference. And then yung difference din ng dalawang formula na to is that si denominator ni sample variance is n minus 1 or the total number of samples subtracted by 1. Tapos si variance of a population naman, that's big N, which means the total number of population yung gagamitin natin sa population variance. So for instance, this is the example that I have used last meeting. So this is the income of Mr. John's business in one of his operating weeks. So if you want to take the range of this, saan na? So of course, you have just to identify the lowest and the highest value in this particular data set. So in this case, yung lowest value natin is 4,000. Yung highest value natin is 25,000. So yung range natin is just equal to 25,000 minus 4,000. Okay? So that's just how we get the range, which is equal to 21,000. So that is getting the range of an ungrouped data. And then for the variance, so in taking the variance, uh, we take the mean of the data points and then subtract each data from the mean. And then we square these results and then taking another mean of these squares. So meaning you have to add all of these values. So kailangan lang natin dito i-subtract yung lahat ng data by the mean, kunin natin yung squares, and then i-sum up natin lahat divided by the total number of data minus 1 if we're given the sample. So for instance, meron tayo ditong income ni Mr. John's business. So what I did here is kinonvert ko lang siya into dollars para hindi masyadong malaki yung consume na space. So according to the formula, but this is just S squared. For instance, this is just a sample. So S squared is equal to the summation of X minus X bar, Xi minus X bar squared over N minus 1. So ano dito si Xi? Si Xi are all of these values. Itong lahat ng income, yan yung Xi. So isa-isa natin siyang i-subtract by the mean. Tapos yung mean naman natin dito, of course, we have to identify. And in identifying the mean of an ungrouped data, so kailangan muna natin kunin yung summation ng lahat ng income divided by the number of income that we have. So the question is, ano yung mean ng income dito ni Mr. John's business? The income of Mr. John's business. Anyone from the class? What's the mean here? What's X bar? Diba, we have discussed this already last meeting. Anyone from the class?
13, sir.
13? How did you get 13?
Gin-adapt ko tanan, sir, nga income tapos divided by 7.
Tapos divided by
7.
7. Okay, so that's actually just, yes, it's actually just getting the mean. You have to add all of the value divided by perhera. So in this case, 7. So we divide by 7. So that means that we have to subtract lahat ng income ni Mr. John dito by 13. Kasi si X bar is 13, di ba? So according to the formula, lahat ng data na to would be subtracted by 13. Tapos, after natin i-subtract, pag makuha natin yung difference, isa-square natin, and then we are going to take the summation of all of those values. So, kung manually natin siyang i-input in the formula, ganito yung magiging output natin. So, in here, ito parang yung exact translation ng formula. So, lahat ito sila yung income ni Mr. John, $25, 20, 10, 15, 10, 7, and $4, 'di ba? Lahat ng values, lahat ng data is divided by is subtracted by 13. Tas si 13 naman dito siya yung mean natin. And then of course, isa-square natin sila lahat. Kasi yun yung formula. And then we have to add all of them. So, yung addition naman, that is the summation, 'di ba? Yung formula is the summation of xi minus x bar squared. So lahat ng xi minus x bar squared, i-add natin divided by n minus 1. In this case, yung n natin, yung data, is 7 lang subtracted by 1. Okay, so if we're going to input this to our calculator, we would have, uh, what's gonna be the value of this? Okay, so this would be approximately equal to 300 something. Okay, but then we can actually parang put it this way. Ayan. So kung marami naman yung time niyo, okay lang din naman if you put it in a table. So lahat ng x linagay ko sa first row, the first row, ayan. And then for the second row, ilalagay ko naman dito si difference and then ni mean. So basically lahat ng x value dito i-subtract ko by the mean. Okay, so that would be 25 minus 13, that's 12, 20 minus 13 is 7, and so on. So, ganyan yung value sa second row. And then, I would take the squares sa lahat ng value sa second row. So, 12 squared is 144, 7 squared is 49, and so on. Okay? So, actually, parang this is just the exact translation nung kanina, nung formula natin kanina. Or yung ginawa natin, yung sinow ko kanina, this one right here. Yan. So, yung table ko kanina is parang ganito lang din. So, kayo lang, if you're going to use this or kung magti-table kayo, okay lang din. Okay, so this is, again, it's an example for ungrouped data. Ano? So, pag meron na tayong squares of the difference ng xi tapos ni mean, sa third row, pwede na natin silang i-sum up. Kasi pag ma-sum up natin sila, that is now the time where pwede natin siyang i-divide by n minus 1 by 6 kasi si n natin is 7 minus 1 is 6. So 332, we divide that by 6. So our variance is 55.33. So yun. That's just how we solve for the variance of a given data set. So the first thing we have to do, if we're given a group data, identify muna natin yung mean. And then after that, we subtract lahat ng datas natin by that mean. Tapos i-square natin lahat ng difference. We get the sum of all those squares. Tapos we divide by n minus 1 or the number of datas given minus 1. So that's just the variance. And then we have, of course, the third measure of dispersion, which is called the standard deviation. Now, standard deviation can easily be identified if you already have your variance. Bakit? Kasi sa standard deviation, if you can see the formula, standard deviation is just S equals the square root of the summation of xi minus x bar squared over n minus 1. Sa standard deviation, we are just taking the square root of the variance. So if you already have your variance, if you take the square root of the variance of the value of your variance, then that's automatically your standard deviation. Okay? So kung may variance ka na, madali na lang yung standard deviation. You would simply take the square root of your variance. So standard deviation is a statistic that measures the dispersion of a data set relative to its mean and is calculated as the square root of the variance. The standard deviation is calculated as the square root of the variance by determining each data point's deviation relative to the mean. So if this is our if this is our data and we know that the variance for this is equal to 55.33, di ba? Now if we take the square root of 55.33, 25.33, our standard deviation would be 7.43863 something. And then if we round that off, that would be approximately equal to 7.44. So that is the standard deviation. So yun lang, that's just parang for me this is the easiest sa lahat kasi kung meron ka ng variance. Kasi pag may variance ka na, square root na lang ng variance, standard deviation na. So those are uh, the measure of spread or measure of dispersion for ungrouped data. That is how we solve for the measure of spread. And then, uh, we also have, saan na yung ano ko? Measure of spread for group data. Hmm? Waray. Wait lang ha. I'm just gonna find my ano. Kala ko dire-diretso na yung slides ko dito. Lang ha. I'm gonna try to present another slide. Is my presentation visible na? Ulit? Nakikita na yung presentation?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we are now on measure of dispersion for group data. Kasi for measure of central tendency, we have also solved for measure of central tendency, no? Wherein we are given a grouped frequency distribution just like this in your screen. Tapos, nag-add lang tayo ng information on another row to solve for the measure of central tendency of that particular grouped frequency data or group frequency distribution. So, this time we are going to solve for the measure of dispersion or measure of spread of a given grouped frequency distribution, just like uh, particularly ini-nga yung screen. So, this is what we're going to solve for. So, how do we solve for the range? So, in solving for the range, that is just the upper boundary of the highest class interval minus the lower boundary of the lowest class interval. So that is how we solve for the range. So for instance, we're given this data set, okay? So what is the highest class interval? Of course, it's given here now 41 to 50. What would be our upper boundary of the highest class interval? Now, the upper limit is 50, diba? So 50 yung upper limit natin. To get the upper boundary, we just have to add the upper limit by 0.5. Okay? So therefore, yung upper boundary natin is 50.5, and then yung lower boundary of the lowest class interval, which is 1. Yung lowest class interval natin is 1. Yung lower limit, lowest class interval 1 to 10. Lower limit natin is 1. So yung lower boundary is 1 minus 0.05 minus 0.5. So that is 50.5 yung upper boundary of the highest class interval subtracted by the lower boundary of the lowest class interval, which is zero point 0.5. So 50.5 minus 0.50. So that would be 50. So that is how we get the range of group data. So again, no, that is just the upper boundary of the highest class interval subtracted by the lower boundary of the lowest class interval. So pag upper boundary, plus zero point 0.5. Pag lower boundary, minus zero point 0.5. This is just like what we did sa lower boundary ng median tapos modal class. 'Di ba? So lower boundary, tagma-minus tayo. Pag upper boundary naman, nagpa-plus. And then, of course, we have to solve also for the variance. The variance naman of a group data, so we have a different formula actually. So sa variance of a group data, we have the formula S squared is equal to the summation of F multiplied by hello, hello, hello.
Nawara.
Can you still hear me?
Sir, nawala sir ang kwan,
Wala ka
Nawalan
nawara
siya,
summation.
ako.
sir.
Si Manini. Ay, nakata. Measure of dispersion na kita, and then that was, I think, variance na ano?
Yes, sir.
Variance of group. Hindi na din na. At least PowerPoint lang nawara there on internet. Anong page na tayo? Variance. Ayun. Feel ko diri mo pa internet connection didi. Nawara ni mo? Ano ba yan? ACLC? Okay, is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
Ayun.
Yes, sir.
Kung love kat ginoo ko no may internet ka. Okay. So, we're now on variance, no? So, again, the formula is different. The computations are different for ungrouped and group data. Ayan. So, for variance for group data, meron tayong formula na S squared is equal to the summation of F multiplied by XM minus X bar squared all over N minus 1. So, dapat, para hindi natin ma-misinterpret to, do, dapat meron tayo ditong braces to indicate na itong lahat yung squared, hindi, yung product nito ni f times the square of xm minus x bar, i-take natin yung summation lahat nila. Okay. So, may mga familiar notation dito which is yung xm. xm ginamit natin to in solving for the mean, di ba? xm is the class mark which is just the middle value of our class interval. 'Di ba? Midpoint ng class interval. Tapos si x bar naman, of course, that is the sample mean. Sample mean. So, again, no, in solving for the variance, we have to get the sample muna as sample mean. or the mean. So F here is the frequency which is given, XM is the class mark, X bar is the mean, and N is the total frequency. So if we are given this data, meron tayong given na grouped frequency data dito. So for us to get the variance, kailangan muna natin kunin yung X bar, 'di ba? Now, if you can still recall, yung X bar natin, yung mean, I think X bar mean is equal to the summation of F times XM, 'di ba? All over N. So kailangan muna natin i-solve si mean, which is kailangan natin ng XM or class mark. And then class mark, that is just the midpoint of our class interval. So in this particular example, gumawa na ako ng XM. So yung midpoint ng class interval ko sa 41 to 50 is 45.5. Yung 31 to 40 naman, that's 35.5 and so on. Okay? So yung XM, again, that's just the midpoint of your class interval. And then we get the product of frequency and class mark, which is we'll be adding to the next row. So yung actually sinolve ko na pala dito yung X bar. So yung X bar natin is 27.9. No, but then if we want to solve this, pwede naman natin i-solve to muna dito para makuha natin talaga yung mean. So wait lang ha, I'll just get my calculator. Okay, so this would be F times XM. So if you multiply, if we want to get X bar, so kailangan nating mag-add ng row, which is F times XM. Okay, so 8 times 45.5, that's actually 364. Tapos si 10 times 35.5, that is 355. That's a give. And tapos si 25.5 naman times 20, that is 510. 510. And then si 10 times 15.5 is 155. Tapos si 5.5 times 2 naman, that is 11. And then we have to sum all of these values. Diba? Sum up natin silang lahat. So that's 364 plus 355 plus 510 plus 155 plus 11. So that's 1395. Tapos pag i-divide natin siya by 50, divided by n, so that would be 27.9,
1.9.
which is this one. Okay? So lahat ng values natin dito ng XM natin is subtract natin by 27.9. Okay? I'm gonna erase na lang muna lahat. Okay. So according to the formula, I have to subtract XM by X bar. So lahat ng class mark natin, I would subtract by 27.9. And I'm going to add another row for that. Another column rather. So that is 45.5 times minus 27.9. That is 17.6. 35.5 minus 27.9 is 7.6 and so on. So ito siya. That's just XM minus X bar. Ito dito. This column. Okay, so lahat ng yan is just the difference of the XM minus 27.9. And then after that, we have to get the squares. So we have to multiply them by themselves. So 17.6 squared is 309.76 and so on. 7.6 naman squared is 57.76. Okay? So lahat naman for column, for the fifth column, so ini-square lang natin lahat ng nasa fourth column. We just take the square. And then after that, we multiply by, tapos na tayo dito. If you can see here sa upper right, tapos na lahat to. Tapos na si xm minus x bar squared. We can now multiply that to f. So we have to multiply f here. And then yung product natin, we would put in another column. So gagawa tayo ulit ng column which is f times xm minus x bar squared, which is 309.76 times 8. So again, we're multiplying this row, this column to this column. Yan. So 8 times 309.76 is 2,478.08. 10 times 57.76 is 577.6. 20 times 5.76, that's 115.2. 10 times 153.76 is 1,537.6. And 2 times 501.76 is 103.52. And then, of course, hindi pa natin ina-apply sa summation. So to get the summation, of course, that's just the sum of all that's preceding that summation sign. So, isa-sum up natin lahat nito. Okay? So that is 2,478.08 plus 577 pababa. So yung sum natin would be 5,712. And of course, hindi pa yan yung sagot natin. That is just the numerator, di ba? So this is equal to 5,712 divided by n minus 1. And we know here that n is 50. That's the total frequency. We subtract that by 1. So this is divided by 49. Now, 5,712 divided by 49 is equal to
11, 16.
116. Yes. 116.57. That's actually 5714286, but then in-approximate na lang natin siya, or we rounded off to two decimal places. So this is now our variance. Okay? It's actually not that hard, no? And then, of course, kung may variance na tayo, to get the tawag dito, the standard deviation, kailangan lang natin i-square root si variance. Now, the square root of 116.57 is equal to 10.80. Okay? So, that is now our standard deviation. So, ganun lang siya kasimple. That is now those are the measure of no, that's the measure of dispersion. Okay, that is how you measure the spread of your data with respect to the center distribution or to the mean. Okay, wait lang ha. I think we can try to continue kasi we still have time naman.
James Albion, Rona Jane Laureta, Julian Macaba.
Okay, so those are no what we have discussed so far are the
John Paul Kailan.
that is the descriptive statistics. No, we're just trying to describe really what our data, specifically the spread and then the center of our distribution. And then of course, yung graph, yung mga graphical representation, that's also those are also a part of descriptive statistics, ano, when we're trying to put or to convert our data into graphs. So that is also a part of descriptive statistics. We have the bar graph, line graph, and then the pie chart, 'di ba? So those are also a part of descriptive statistics.
The reason kung why is it the fluctuating economy of the Philippines? Is it because of the COVID-19 pandemic or because of the lack of government support or program? Okay, let's have the first group. You have 1 minute. Each member has 1 minute to give his or her opening statement. 1 minute starts now.
Visible na ba yung screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so proceed na muna tayo, no, kasi we still have time. We have a little less than 20 minutes before mag 1 hour yung Gmeet natin. So, parang, ayan. So we are now on, after kasi sa descriptive statistics, straight tayo to the normal distribution or the normal curve. Diba? We already have discussed this if you can still recall. No, but then, kailangan, kailangan ulit natin siya i-discuss. Okay? So, the normal distribution, so parang ito yung ginawa natin sa mathematics in the modern world. Okay, we're in. Ito yung parang it looks like this. Nasaan ba yung color dito? Ganun na lang siguro ako, red. Okay. Diba? This is the one that looks like this. Diba? Ayan. Tapos meron tayo sa gitna is our mean. Tapos meron tayong mga standard deviation dito. Okay, this is the normal distribution. This slide, no, a normal distribution should be a continuous probability distribution. And then its graph is called a normal curve, which is a bell-shaped curve. And then the mean, median, and mode are equal and located at the center of the curve. So, kung perfectly normal yung data distribution natin, no, if symmetric talaga yung data distribution, then the mean, median, and mode are actually equal. Pare-parehas yung value ng mean, median, and mode natin. And then the curve is symmetric and mesocortic. Pag sinabi nating symmetric, the left side, 'di ba, the curve is being divided by that line sa gitna. Symmetric meaning magkaparehas si left and right side. Mirror image siya, no? So the left side of this distribution is mirror image of the right side. And then yung mesocortic naman, that's actually kurtosis, no? That's one type of a kurtosis wherein parang yung peakness of our distribution. Just can't remember yung dalawa, but then yung isa is mesocortic, meron ata tayong leptocortic, platycortic, okay? So meron tayong ganito. Yung isa parang flat lang siya. Tapos meron din tayong mas peak siya, and then may distribution. Okay? So pag sinabi nating mesocortic, that is parang yung sa gitna, okay, ng flat tapos yung peak. So kaya the curve is symmetric and mesocortic. And then the curve naman is asymptotic to x-axis. What does this mean? When we say asymptotic, parang this is getting closer and closer to x-axis, to this actually, ito yung x-axis natin. Getting closer and closer to that, but not reaching. Pinagtagpo pero di tinadhana. Amit hiya it asymptotic relationship. No, meaning it's approaching to that line, but then it will never reach that line. Getting closer and closer to, but would never actually meet. Ganon yung asymptotic relationship. And then the total area under the curve is equal to 1.0, or in percentage 100%. Uh,
Another one?
so this is the normal curve, ano? It looks like this. Tapos yung area naman,
Alveolar.
the area under that curve is actually it can actually be solved using this formula. But then we're not actually gonna use the formula, ano, kasi meron na tayong table of values to get the actual measure, the actual value under the normal curve. But then kung gusto nyong maghirap, you can actually use this formula. So that's f of x is equal to 1 over the tag dito, ano notation na to? This is the standard deviation yan, di ba? Kasi square root of the variance, yeah. That is the sigma times square root of 2 pi raised to e, times e raised to negative x minus mu squared over 2 times sigma squared. For the x is greater than negative infinity but less than positive infinity. So, ayan. So, this is the formula actually to get the actual value under the normal curve. But then, we're not gonna use this. Ano? This is just to introduce to you that may formula talaga in getting the actual measurement under the normal curve. Okay? And then, yan, the areas under the normal curve. So, di ba, this is actually parang yan. So, according to this slide, meron tayong, we have actually parang an approximation. Now, if we are not, like for instance, di ba, you already have an idea of this, di ba, na meron tayong table to actually get the value under the curve from, meron tayong given na value sa with respect to x, no? Tapos titingnan natin yung table, yung tawag doon sa z table, di ba? Titingnan natin yung z table, and then we're going to actually identify kung ano yung measure from that point of the area. But then we actually have an approximation. So, di ba, these are the standard deviation, no? At this is the mean. So, sa middle. Sa right naman, we have the positive 1 standard deviation, positive 2, positive 3, tapos negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Now, if we, from negative 1 to positive 1 na standard deviation, according to this slide, that is actually 68% of the data. Okay? So again, that's 68% of the data that is from the first standard deviations from negative 1 to positive 1. And then, from negative 2 naman to positive 2 na standard deviation, that's actually 95% of data. And then for -3 to +3, that's actually 99.7% of our data. So this is actually the empirical rule, no, for the normal distribution. So approximately 68% of the data lies within one standard deviation. So that's positive and negative one. Approximately 95% of the data lies within two standard deviations from the mean. And then approximately 99.7% of the data lies within three standard deviations of the mean. So kung na-notice nyo dito, from the left na -3 to the right na +3, meron lang tayong 99.7%. Kasi actually, meron pa tayong outliers, no? Positive and negative outliers, meaning from the right and negative outlier na 0.03 or 3% that is not within those -3 to +3. Okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean na hindi sila included, no? Outliers lang sila. Yung 3% na natitira dito. Kasi 'di ba from -3 to +3, 99.7 lang yung values natin. So again, according to this empirical rule, we can actually get, no, the values of our, or how many, parang ilang data ba meron from the mean to +1 na standard deviation. Like say for instance, ito, from the mean, from the center, from 0 to 1, ilang percent ba ng data meron according to the empirical rule? If you have understood the empirical rule, ano yung magiging measure ng value from the mean to 1? If this is my shaded, hello? Am I still audible? Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what
Yes,
is
sir.
parang the percentage or the measure? Ilang percent ba ng data meron from the mean to +1 standard deviation? Kasi according to the empirical rule, from -1 ko, no, to +1, that's 68%. So my question is, from the mean up to +1 standard deviation, ilang percent ng data meron?
34.
Yes, that's actually correct. No, there should be 34 kasi 'di ba alam naman natin according to the property kanina na symmetric. So meaning if we divide 68, kasi 68, that is from -1 to +1. So if you just want to take parang from the center lang to +1, meaning we just have to divide si 68 by 2. So 68 divided by 2, that's actually 34%. So 34% of data lies within the mean up to standard deviation na +1. So I'm going to shade that. So ito kasi shade ko ngayon, ang value nito approximately is 34 or 34%. 0.34 or 34%. Okay, so this is parang how you identify the percentage or the value of the area according to the empirical rule. Okay, so we only have 5 minutes.
It's the government or the lack of government support is the reason why the fluctuating
Wait lang ha. I'm gonna conduct the attendance na baka mamatay na naman yung Gmeet.
why we have a fluctuating because of the lack of government support. Is that what you're saying?
This is data analysis 2A. Okay, so I'm gonna conduct the attendance na kaya it's so a little less than 5 minutes, mawawala na yung Gmeet natin.
Okay, your time is up. Your time is up. Okay, how about the other groups? It's your time to defend. Okay, Lana.
Okay, so I'm gonna call you one by one and then you're going to respond by stating your last name. Aison, Alua,
Aison, sir.
Arpon, Baricante, Bartulay, Bernales,
Arpon, sir.
Bertes,
Bernales, sir.
Briones,
Bernales.
Briones, Bustillo, Cabuello, Cardania,
Gabriel, sir.
Present, sir.
Cardona, Katimbang, Cordero, Docena, Dulor, Figueroa, Gabion, Gagol, Garcia,
Garcia, sir.
Gregorio, Hinayon,
Gregorio, sir.
Hinayon, sir.
Lakbayin,
Gagol po, sir.
Lesiges
Lakbayin,
Amier,
sir.
Sige, present.
Lesiges Arvin,
Sige, sir. Sir.
Llames,
Yeah, mister.
Matosinio, Maurilio,
Morelio, sir. Present.
Mendoza, Miralles, Morado,
present.
Alias,
Nayo,
sir.
Ong, Payos, Perez Francis, Perez Mort,
Present.
Petilla, Pombo, Refuerzo, Regis, Repol, Repalda,
Repol, sir.
Pandal, Alameda,
Salamida, sir.
Tapuay, Tabuklaw,
Tabuklaw, sir.
Tan, Yongson,
Sir. Present.
Yepes,
Jongson, yes, sir. Present. Jongson.
Marino, Huertigue,
Marino, sir.
Timkang,
Sige, sir.
Anara, Udmalin,
Present,
Pablo,
sir. Good morning.
Liala, Sakay, Huy, Miralles, ay, tapos na pala, Kuwa.
Present, sir, kuha.
Okay. So I would just like to request everyone to please open their cameras.
Sir,
Just gonna
excuse me, sir.
take a screenshot. Who's speaking?
So, how will you
Sir Ripaldas, sir, natawag mo. Mura mo na ako bati. Thank you.
Sir, ginagana ako ko ng camera.
according to Rania? So,
Sige, for those who are able to, please open your cams. I'll just take a screenshot
so even
before I dismiss you.
established economy that pandemic really interrupted.
I'm gonna take a screenshot
How will you
in 3,
stand?
2,
Remember,